Welcome back to What Dwells Beneath, the podcast where we descend into the dark and the unusual. I'm your lantern bearer, Percival, and joined with me is my producer, Neku. We also have our research assistants, Hannah and Eleanor. Tonight, we return to the mist-shrouded hollows and the ancient ridges of the Appalachian Mountains. A place where the trees lean in a little too close. The fog clings to the valley like breath on glass, and the back roads wind through hollows that feel forgotten by time. They're thick with tunnels, shadowed creeks, and an atmosphere that presses down on your chest, making every snap of a twig feel deliberate. The air smells of damp earth, pine resin, and something metallic underneath, especially at dusk when the light drains away fast and the mountains seem to swallow sound. This is the domain of the knot deer. At first glance, it looks like any other whitetail. Graceful limbs, tawny coat, and maybe a flash of its tail as it bounds away. But that's the trap. Stay with it a second longer, and the wrongness settles in your gut like ice water. Something is off. Terribly, deeply off. The knot deer isn't just an animal. It's a deer-shaped thing wearing the skin of one, and the more you look, the more it unravels. Tonight, we'll dissect the anatomy of that wrongness, trace its roots in Appalachian oral traditions and its explosive rebirth as modern creepypasta grounded in the chilling biology of real deer afflictions, and we'll talk about the encounters that keep people checking their rearview mirrors after dark. Is it a skinwalker, a diseased animal, or something that learned to wear a familiar face? By the end, I'll share my thoughts. But these mountains have a way of making you doubt what you thought you knew. So grab your headphones, turn off the lights, and lock the doors, because we're about to step off the porch and into the thickets where something isn't quite right. This is a listener-requested episode, so I hope you all enjoy. These legends hit different because it weaponizes the familiar. Deer are everywhere in these hills, elegant, skittish, and part of the landscape. When one stops acting like prey and starts acting like something that hunts, that's when your brain short circuits. It's not a monster roaring from the tree line. It's the thing you see every hunting season suddenly refusing to play by nature's rules. Growing up hearing whispers around mountain fires, I learned early that the woods don't always give clear warnings. Sometimes they wear antlers. Let's start with the anatomy of wrongness, because that's what makes the knot deer so effective. It doesn't need glowing eyes or dripping fangs. The horror is in the details that almost fit. Normal white-tailed deer have eyes set high and wide on the sides of their heads. This is classic prey configuration for spotting predators from almost any angle. However, reports on knot deer flip that. Witnesses describe forward-facing eyes, predator eyes, locked directly on you with an intelligence that feels far too human. There's weight behind the gaze, a calculating awareness that makes your skin crawl. It's not curiosity, it's assessment. The movement steals it. Real deer are fluid, bounding leaps, graceful trots, quick flicks of the tail before vanishing. However, knot deer unfold. That word. That's the word that repeats in almost all the accounts. Unfolding. Legs that bend at wrong angles or too many joints. Jerky, mechanical motions like a puppet with a half-cut string. Some reports mention them rising slowly onto hind legs, standing like a person at the tree line. Forelimbs hanging or twitching. Others describe gaits that are too fast or too stiff, bodies that seem to rearrange themselves mid-stride. One witness compared it to watching a coat rack learn to walk. And then there's the stare. Knot deer, they don't bolt. They hold position, sometimes for minutes. Eyes never leaving yours, even as your car creeps closer on a dark two-lane. There's no skittishness, no flight response, just that unblinking, patient regard, like it's memorizing you. Some accounts even add teeth that look too numerous or even pointed, ears that twitch with unnatural precision, or proportions that are more moose-like and bulky instead of delicate. The longer you look, the more the illusion frays until only dread remains. These aren't random mutations, they feel deliberate, like something's trying and almost succeeding to wear a familiar shape. The knot deer sits at the crossroads of old regional folklore and shiny new digital legends. Appalachian oral traditions have long spoken of mimics and skinwalkers, entities that borrow the forms of local wildlife to move among humans undetected. Cherokee and other indigenous stories tell of spirits or witches who shift into animals, often deer, to spy, lure, or punish. European settlers brought their own tales of fey tricksters and cursed beasts. Over time, in the isolated hollows, these blended into warnings. If the deer in the yard doesn't act right, don't linger. Don't call to it. Don't meet its eyes too long. Tales of these creatures go back for centuries. However, the specific Nadja label and its viral life is modern. The term exploded around 2019 to 2020, starting on Tumblr posts describing encounters that felt too precise to dismiss. From there, it flooded to TikTok, then to Reddits based in Appalachia and cryptids, and from there, it goes on and on. Suddenly, people worldwide are sharing their own "that wasn't a deer" stories, layering details until the creature itself solidified. What began as a regional unease became global creepypasta, shared, remixed, embellished in comment sections until it felt ancient. Because it is. This is a perfect case study in how the internet can resurrect folklore at a lightning speed, turning half-remembered mountain warnings into a phenomenon that now haunts trails from the Blue Ridge to places far outside Appalachia. Yet the fear has deeper soil. Long before social media, locals spoke of these things in the woods that mimicked game animals to draw hunters in or watch them from the edges of clearings. The knot deer feels like old caution wearing fresh antlers. To ground this into something tangible, and perhaps even more disturbing, let's look at the biological explanations. Sometimes, the scariest answer is the one science hands us. Chronic wasting disease, often called zombie deer disease, is a prion illness spreading through deer populations across North America. It attacks the brain, causing drastic weight loss, drooling, repetitive behaviors, tremors, and a complete loss of fear towards humans. These affected animals stumble, stand listlessly, or move with jerky, uncoordinated gaits. They can appear like they are stuck with strained postures, staring blankly, or approaching people instead of fleeing. To a tired driver on a back road at dusk, this could easily register as a knot deer. This disease is fatal, always, and it's expanding its range, raising concerns for both wildlife and potential human health complications down the line. Then there are physical mutations. Piebald deer, those with patchy white coats instead of the usual brown, already look otherworldly under headlights. Birth defects, injuries, or rare conditions can twist limbs, alter proportions, or create extra joints that make movement look unnatural. A deer rearing on hind legs to reach, browse, or scan isn't unheard of, but in the right light, at that right moment, it becomes something that shouldn't exist. These real afflictions don't diminish the encounters. If anything, they make them heavier. Because even if it's just a sick animal, watching something that should be graceful decay into something predatory and wrong carries its own special horror. In fact, the repetitive nature of these reports across all the tellings is extremely spooky. But before we go deeper into the hollows, a quick word about how you can support What Dwells Beneath. If these journeys into the eerie and the unexplained keep you company on long drives or late nights, consider joining our Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you get yearly ad-free episodes, bonus deep dives into regional legends, exclusive research notes, Q&A sessions, and the chance to suggest future topics. Higher tiers bring custom voice messages, behind the scenes audio, and even your name as producer on select shows. Patreon is what lets me chase these stories without compromise and keeps the show independent and strange. Head to patreon.com/whatdwellsbeneath and pick whatever tier feels right. Every pledge means more nights like this. Thank you to our existing Patreons. You're the reason the shadows stay deep. Now let's step back into the encounters. First, the roadside sighting. You're driving a winding mountain road after dark. Headlights catch eye shine, and they're normal at first, but the deer doesn't bolt. It stands perfectly still in the middle of the lane, body angled just enough to watch you approach. As you slow, it doesn't flinch. Various encounters and witnesses say it takes slow, deliberate steps towards your car. Others describe it simply as staring into the vehicle past, then turning its head 180 degrees to keep watching. The feeling isn't fear for the animal, it's fear of it. Then comes the bipedal shift, the moment that breaks the brain. A camper or homeowner glances out a window and sees what looks like a deer in the yard. Only it's standing upright on hind legs, forelimbs dangling or pressed against the glass. One account from the Blue Ridge describes a figure rising slowly outside a second-story window, neck craning at an impossible angle to peer inside. Another tells of something unfolding from all fours to bipedal in a jerky series of motions before looping into the trees on two legs. The witnesses don't always run immediately. The wrongness freezes them at first. It would freeze me. Now, other patterns have emerged. Not deer that scream with voices that sound almost human or like distorted recordings. Ones that follow hikers at a distance, mirroring their pace. Groups that seem to communicate without sound. And the overwhelming sense of being assessed, like prey that has suddenly become interesting. These aren't just jump scare monsters. They're slow, creeping realization that the ordinary world just slipped. In fact, there's an encounter on Reddit that describes this exact scenario. One driver in the Appalachian foothills was heading home at night when he and his cousin spotted what looked like a normal deer beside the road. As they slowed, it stepped into the lane. Then it rose up on its hind legs and began walking casually around on two legs. Both men were experienced outdoorsmen, but this thing moved with a wrong, deliberate motion before melting back into the darkness. Another encounter by a woman named Liz had this to say. Every now and then, people in my town see these things that look like deer, but they aren't deer, and they scare the hell out of us. The one we saw was the wrong color. It was too dark brown and shaggy for this time of year. It looks like a deer, but it never stands close enough to the rest of the herd, and they don't act right or move right. The second time I saw one, literally the thing comes out of the woods 2 yards from us, and that's way too close. That's the thing with not deer. They're too close, and it didn't move right. My brother and I just froze because our brain is trying to figure it out. It's hard to explain, but you feel like you're holding your breath when you see one. My brother super quietly says, "What's wrong with that buck? Do you see it?" Its antler nubs were straight up and forward, and it's too dark and skinny and super shaggy. And it was too quiet. It's staring at us and its eyes aren't right. They were too forward kind of. And they were all black, not like normal, darker. And it was way too big. The one we saw a few weeks ago was weird. It was just standing in the middle of the road at the top of the hill. It was still dusk, and as we got closer, it was just weird looking. The neck was kind of too long and looking at us. We could see the eyes glowing from the headlights, but they were too green and too close together. It slid into the trees, and I sped by it, but we both looked in the rear view, and it slid back into the middle of the road, like it was watching us drive away. It didn't jump into the grass, it slid. Not walked, not jumped, it slid like it was on a track. That's how they move. You can't look away from their eyes. That's how you know it's not a deer. That, and you can't talk about it when it's happening. It's like this weird force or sensation that silences you and will hold your breath until it's gone. That was Liz's encounter. Then We have an encounter by someone that went as wry, and this is what they had to say. I was staying at my grandparents' house, which is in the mountains over a little lake. I didn't like the woods there because they creeped me out, but I couldn't tell why. My grandpa even agreed with me. They were weird and said he'd seen weird things, but he wouldn't tell me about it. Well, one night, it was a full moon. They were in bed and I was up reading. I looked out the window, and on the lawn between the house and the lake was a deer. But it was like not a deer. It was standing on its hind legs and it was dancing. It was dancing. Like jumping from leg to leg, jerking its front legs around in the air and twitching its head. It had horns, so I know it was a buck. I watched it for a long time, maybe 20 minutes, and it seemed like it was looking up at the house, and it never stopped. If you've ever locked eyes with something on a lonely Appalachian road that stared back with too much knowing, or heard hooves that didn't sound quite right, if you have your own story you'd like to tell, if you have any encounter whatsoever, send them my way at whatdwellspod@gmail.com. Your stories keep the shadows alive. This email will also be in the episode description. Theories around the not deer split along familiar lines. Some see it as a genuine supernatural mimic, skinwalker, forest spirit, or interdimensional thing wearing a borrowed form to observe or hunt. The intelligence in the eyes, the deliberate wrongness, and the way encounters leave people shaken for years all point to something beyond biology for believers. This even ties to older Appalachian lore of haints and trickster entities. It gives it a cultural weight. Some believers even state this is an alien. I know, that's a bit of a reach, but there is even a movie about this called Significant Other, and you can go check that out on Paramount Plus or wherever you want to rent movies these days. On the naturalistic side, it's misidentification plus psychology. This could just be a sick deer with CWD, a piebald anomaly. And it doesn't just stop at deer. There is even reports of a not bear and a not dog. However, most reports have been glimpsed in low lights, which gets filtered through expectations and fear. The internet then amplifies and standardizes these stories, creating a feedback loop where people see not deer because they've been primed to it. Ad fatigue, isolation on back roads, and the human brain's talent for pattern seeking. That's when the legend grows. Now, if you are curious on my take, the not deer is mostly the natural world showing its bleaker edges. Diseased animals acting in ways that trigger primal alarms. But there is a sliver of something more. The consistency of intelligence reported, the emotional residue these encounters leave, and the way the archetypes fit so neatly into older mimic lore suggests we're tapping into a deeper unease about the wild places that still refuse to be fully known. In the end, it's the almost right that terrifies most. These could be diseased animals, or it's something more. Something that we truly don't understand. We've walked the ridges with the not deer tonight, from its subtle anatomical betrayals to its digital bloom, its diseased realities, and the chilling moments people still carry. Whether it's a diseased creature or it's a predator in disguise, one thing is certain. Next time you see a deer on a lonely Appalachian road, look twice, because if it's wrong, it already knows you're there. The trails and hollows remain open, but my recommendation, maybe drive a little faster at dusk. This legend lives on in forums, fireside talk, and the quiet places where the trees watch back. If this stirred a memory or theory, share it at whatdwellspod@gmail.com. Your stories shape the next descent. And speaking of that, our next episode is something unsettling and heavily recommended by our listeners. Until then, my dear dwellers, stay safe and keep your eyes on the tree line.